This is Mary and Lou, and it's June 1st, 2018, and I'm interviewing Susie Corbett at the Globe Hub in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm just asking her a couple questions because we missed this on the first part. So I guess what we had talked about was your family coming, how they got to Doraville, how your family got to Doraville, and a little bit about your family's past and how they actually got to the United States.
Okay.
So if you could talk about that.
So my grandparents, I only know my grandmother on my dad's mother. I know that she immigrated in 1899. And then on my mother's side, her father came in 1900, and then her mother came in 1915 from Japan to California. Both of my parents were born in California, and they, grew up there, and they lived there until, my parents, they married, had my brother in California, and during the war, when they had the what they called relocation camps, internment. My mom, my dad, my brother, and most of their family members were interned. Some went to different locations, but my parents and my brother were in Arizona, where they were in camp for about 18 months. And my dad was allowed to leave camp first when they, decided they were going to allow them to leave. But my dad was allowed to leave first so he could find work. And he went to Chicago and got a job working for American Terra. And then the family, my mother and my brother, moved to Chicago. And they lived there, had my two sisters and myself while they were in Chicago. And in 1960 was when my dad was offered a transfer either to Los Angeles or to Doraville, and it ended up being Doraville. So they moved to Doraville in 1960. And bought a house on Addison Drive in Doraville and lived there until they, both passed away. My dad passed away in 93 and my mom in 2004.
And you spent most of your life here.
Yes, when I was 3 or 4 when we moved to Doraville, and then I grew up. I went to elementary school, Northwoods Elementary, went to high school at Sequoia, and have lived in the area just about most of my life, really.
Did you get married right after high school?
I did, yes.
So how did you meet your husband?
It was in high school.
You were both at Sequoia?
Yes.
He grew up in Doraville, too?
Yes. Yeah.
How long had you been dating?
Not that long, really. Probably less than a year. Yeah.
Well, do you know what was the address on Addison?
2738.
When's the last time you went by? Was it after your mother passed away?
Yeah, I actually will drive by periodically. And it still looks good. Yeah, but because I'm in the area driving, every now and then I think, I'm just going to drive down there and take a look at it. And so I do, off and on, go by.
Do you have one strong memory of that house?
Really not one. It's kind of just a lot. Mm-hmm. Of memories. I just, remember my dad always working out in the yard, and we had he planted pine trees in the front, and he would go out there. He like sculpted them, and people would drive by, and I mean, sometimes they'd stop, and because I mean, it was just so noticeable that he had these sculpted pine trees out there.
Like what kind of sculpt?
Just kind of, I don't even know really, but he would just go in, just keep them shaped different ways and stuff. But he loved gardening, and so it's really just a, collection of memories about, I mean, there are a lot of memories about him working out in the yard, and just about the family being together. And remember, we didn't have air conditioning when we first moved there, and it was just so different. It was so much simpler than, we didn't have air conditioning, but it was okay, and just, different pets we had, and just all that. I mean, it was good. We had, like I said, we had great neighbors, and so it was, those were good memories at home and with the neighbors and all.
Are you also a gardener?
No. I do not have my father's green thumb. I like to, plant things here and there, but I'm not like my father at all.
Were you more like your mother? Or
I'm definitely more like my mother.
in what way? Ways?
I'm more quiet. I'm better now with communicating, like with my husband and my daughter and family. But definitely, I mean, there's a lot of things probably that I don't share. I'm very, like to keep my personal things, private, and not real outgoing. And that's, that's how my mother was. Very friendly and, caring, but not very outgoing.
I beg to differ. I think that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
you're
for doing
welcome.
that again.
You're welcome. And we were in the store, and there were some young kids that they just followed us, from aisle to aisle, and just, stared. And I remember going to, like restaurants, and, literally people would stop and, turn and stare. And so I knew that, there was a reason, we looked different. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess, from early on, I knew that. And then as I got older, then, I was teased in school some, so I knew that I was different.
Did you talk to your parents about this? Or your siblings?
I've thought about that recently, and I don't remember having a lot of conversation about it. I know that they, like my sister, Lindy, I'm sure that she had some of the same experiences, but not, as far as teasing or anything, not, those experiences were not together that I remember. I mean, she may have experienced separately, but my mother was with me sometimes when I remember being at the Dorville pool, and, some kids circling around me and teasing me, and my mother had to come over and, get them to stop. And so, my mother was aware, but I don't remember actually ever talking to her about it, because communication verbal communication was just not we didn't talk a lot in our house.
Do you know, can you surmise why that was?
Why there wasn't much communication? I think it was a combination of maybe that generation, but also a cultural thing. There wasn't a lot of communication between my parents and us. I mean, my dad he went to work. He worked all day, came home tired. He may go out and work out in the yard. My sister and I kind of laugh about it, but I mean, there were days when he may not actually have spoken to us at all. And it wasn't because he didn't care about us, but he didn't talk a lot to us until after we were older. And then he started talking to us more. And my mother she was quiet. She took care of the family, took care of us and took care of the house. And, I mean, I'm not saying that there was no talking at all, but to actually discuss emotions or situations, there just wasn't a lot of communication about that.
How did you know that there wasn't a lot of communication? I mean, because how did you know that, were you around friends and families in which there was a lot of communication, so you had something to compare to, or did you know this growing up?
I didn't really think anything about it.
Yeah.
It was just the way that it was. And I didn't really, I wasn't comparing or never really thought about it growing up. But looking back now, I realize, and my sister, realizes that that was the way it was in our house. And, I mean, there was no lack of love, never a doubt that they didn't care about us. But there was not a lot of verbal communication.
Did you get the impression that your parents had friends? Or was there you said you were the only Asian, so I guess there was no other Japanese families in the area, or?
There weren't. There was a family, and I think it was in the maybe early 70s, that somehow, I'm not sure how my mother met them, but it was a mother, father, and a son, and my mother started tutoring the son. I'm not, like I said, I don't know how they met them, but my mother did tutor the son for a while. But I mean, as far as friends, my parents had a lot of friends. I mean, the people that my dad worked with, and the neighborhood, the neighbors. And my mother actually was a kindergarten teacher for a little while. And some of her best friends were, other kindergarten teachers. And through the church, we were members of the Presbyterian Church on Chestnut. And so through church, we met people, and, my mother had some very good friends in church.
Was that church mainly composed of local Doravillians?
Uh-huh.
Or it was more of a community church and didn't attract people from outside Doraville? Or?
At that time, I believe that most of the members were very local.
did you ever get out to Atlanta? Like, what was back then? Like, what was the relationship of Atlanta to Doraville? Because now, Doraville's kind of seen as part of Metro Atlanta. Was there more of a separation, or was Atlanta seen as like really far away? Like, what?
What I remember is that it was totally separate. It was far away. The only time I remember going into Atlanta as a young child was at first there were no Asian restaurants. And so to get Chinese food, we had to go downtown to Atlanta.
Which restaurant? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, I wish I could remember.
Do you know where it was?
I don't. I mean, I can find out. My sister probably remembers. Because it was fairly famous. It was well known then. Probably because it was one of the only. But I can't remember the name of it. But other than that, we really didn't go into town. It was not, it was totally separate. It was, everything we did was right in Doraville and around, off of Buford Highway.
Were you aware as a young girl of the significance of what was happening in the South at the time, or was there any awareness of the civil rights movement? Because when you came in 1960, that was on the cusp of a lot of important historical events. Did you have any consciousness?
I didn't, because I was so young. And I don't know that my sister, I don't know that she did either. But yeah, that was right in the beginning of the, the civil rights movement and all of that. And, that was, Atlanta was right in the middle of all that. But I don't remember having any awareness about that. It was all kind of my little world. And I was young. I don't really remember anything at the time about that.
As you've gotten older and you've become more, did you go away for college? Did you stay here? Did you?
No, I did not go to college. I finished high school, and then I got married soon after that. And I stayed in the Doraville area for a little while, and then moved away just a couple of times for very brief periods, a year or less than a year. But other than that, I've really lived in the area most of my life, really just about all my life.
How has it changed? What did Buford Highway look like in 1960 to 1970 when you were growing up?
Yeah, very different. Like I said, there were not a lot of these strip shopping malls or centers, are newer as compared to back then. There were not, any of those, and so there were fewer businesses. It was very like almost barren. There was not all of that, all the shops and everything that there are now, and no diversity in the residents or the businesses.
What do you mean by diversity? Can you be more specific?
Well, there were no Asian or Hispanic stores or the restaurants. I think there was a Japanese restaurant and a Chinese restaurant that I remember on Buford Highway, and that would have been maybe late 70s, early 80s that I remember. And then there was the Chinese family that I remember in high school. They had a Chinese restaurant. I think it was in Pine Tree Plaza. But that's what I mean is that was a big deal because there wasn't anything else other than just your typical, drug stores and grocery stores and Pine Tree Plaza. I remember at one time there was a bowling alley, and then it turned into a skating rink that we used to go to. And there wasn't all of what's available now.
Where was the skating rink?
It was in Pine Tree Plaza. I'm not sure what's in there now, but you know where Pine Tree Plaza is? Okay, in the very middle of the main strip, it was there. It was a bowling alley at one time, and my sister was a very good bowler, and so she bowled there. I remember going there to see her bowl, and then they turned it into a skating rink later when I was, I guess I was probably in my early teens. And so, it was there. I'm not sure what's there now, but it was right there in the middle of that.
Was it a big deal? You said it was a big deal when there was like the first Chinese restaurant or Japanese restaurant. Like, how did you feel? How did seeing that make you feel, or seeing another family in school make you feel?
Yeah, I don't remember, like, as far as the restaurants, I don't really remember. I mean, I enjoyed going there with my family, but I don't remember ever thinking or feeling anything really about it. I do remember the Chinese restaurant when we went there for the first time, and I think we went there because someone that my dad worked with had recommended it, and so we went there. But I remember that the people that were working in the back, I think they were Chinese or they were Asian, but they were like at the window looking at us, I guess they were glad to see some Asian patrons there. But I don't really remember having any feelings, about that. And as far as the other families during school, I didn't really interact with them because it was by that time I had my group of friends, and I was a teenager in high school, and so I didn't really. It was noteworthy, but I didn't really feel a connection with them, I guess because I still felt like I still felt isolated, because that's the way I had grown up, just feeling like I was, different and alone. And, but now, seeing all that how everything has transformed, and being out at some of the businesses and everything, it makes me feel good to see that, there is all of this change that has, transpired, and how friends, I see, groups of friends out, at shops and restaurants and things, and, it makes me feel good that they do have that, that I didn't have.
If there is something you would tell to someone who feels really isolated and really alone, even though there are more, it can still feel very isolating. Do you know what you would tell, what you might say? Or even to yourself, what would you say to yourself back then?
Well, now I have the advantage of being an adult and seeing, and really, it's just actually just been very recently, couple of years, that I've realized the impact, the effect that growing up in Doraville with no other Asians around and being teased, and what effect that had on me throughout my life. And so now, I now that I see and I know, I would say that we're all the same inside, and we may look different, but don't let anybody tell you that you're not the same.
What was it in the past few years that led you to that understanding?
I'm not really sure how it happened. I just started started thinking, reflecting, and doing some reading and stuff, and I just realized that my childhood and the thoughts that I had from experiences that I had, that really I didn't realize it, but it definitely made me feel different and for some reason ashamed. And I didn't really realize it, when I was growing up. And because I didn't have, I had my family and I felt comfortable at home. But going out, I didn't have any friends that were having the same experiences that I was having. So I didn't have anybody to share that or, feel like I wasn't alone in that. And so, it just, it had a big effect on me. But, just recently, thinking back on it, and I just realized, those were things that I experienced and that I felt about myself that were not true. It was someone else's thoughts and feelings about me, but it really wasn't me, And so, it's taken a very long time, but I do see, how that happened and how it can happen to a lot of people that don't have someone to talk about, share, and that, is left to their own thinking and feeling and just, living your life based on that.
Do you feel like that individual realization, do you think it's shared by, do you have a sense that it may be shared by a lot of people? Of being ashamed, or because you're different, or
Do you mean just people in general, or
like in this area? Like, you've been here now for a while. You grew up here and you've remained here. Seeing Buford Highway change. And seeing that so close, like up front, and being part of, being one of the first people who is, started the change, or not started, but, being a part of it, like, how did that, maybe change how you, I don't, this is hard for me. I guess the question is really about I guess a lot of people have probably been through that similar experience of being different, especially for Buford Highway. Do you think that as Buford Highway has changed, that the community that has been here, like, how have they absorbed that change? Or are they, has Doraville, have the people of Doraville changed as the demographics of the community has changed?
You know, that I can't really say because I'm not very involved in the community now.
Yeah.
I know that there are still some residents that have lived here since, you know, my parents first moved here, or my family first moved here. And I don't really know because I haven't talked to them, and I don't I can't really get a sense of how they feel about. I think that there's probably some that have embraced it and, you know, appreciate the change, and but there's probably some that, you know, still probably wish that it was less diverse maybe than it is. You know, I don't know. You know, and also because so many of the residents have passed away now, and so, you know, I'm sure they have a lot of different neighbors. The neighborhoods have probably gone through a, you know, transition several times, and so there's probably a group of longtime residents that remember back on when they had all their friends, and, you know, may wish that it was still that way. But I think, you know, like I said, I think there's probably some that really appreciate it's a thriving community, and so I think that there's probably some that do appreciate it, but I can't really say for sure.
Where did you move away to for very brief periods of time?
Well, I moved to Germany for a very brief time because my husband was in the Army. So I went to Germany for a very short time, and then Colorado Springs for, it was less than a year. And then for the same reason, because my husband was in the Army. And other than that, I've lived in the area, or I've lived in Norcross and Buckhead and Grant Park and Snellville. So I've been kind of all over the metro, you know, Atlanta area.
And you live now in Tucker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we bought the house in Tucker to stay close to my mom because when we bought the house, she was in her late 70s. Very late 70s. And, you know, her health was declining, and so I wanted to be close by her. So we bought the house in Tucker, and just like 10 minutes away from where she was and where I grew up. And we didn't think we would stay in Tucker, but we ended up, we love it there. Very convenient. We have great neighbors. And so we've lived there since 2003.
Did you ever visit your cousins and relatives in California?
Mm-hmm.
Where do they live?
At that time when I was younger, and let's see, pretty much all from the time I was, you know, like 5 or 6 on up into my teenage years, we would go out there and visit. And We had relatives that lived in Salinas, Fresno, Los Angeles. I think that's it.
How
But-
many times a year would you go?
We didn't go every year. We maybe would go every several years, maybe. And then after my dad passed away, my sisters and I started going with my mother and going back, out there. And we didn't go every year then, but we would go maybe every other year, because we had a lot of relatives out there at one time. But there's very few now because most of them have passed away. But I still have cousins out there in Sacramento and all and around there, Los Angeles.
Did you ever get the sense that they were having a very different experience growing up in California versus you growing up in Georgia?
I didn't think about it, but when we would go and visit, they had Japanese friends, and so that was noteworthy, but I didn't really give it a lot of thought about their life versus my life. But I did. It was a good experience going out to California because my family, they were all Japanese, and it was just a more, comforting. Besides being family, it was just, felt more connected and more familiar, and
What was it that made it feel more familiar?
Maybe partly because they looked more like me, and growing up, we really didn't eat that much Japanese food. When we moved to Doraville, my mother, she cooked fried chicken, and she didn't do a lot of Japanese cooking. Occasionally we would have some. But going out to California, we had, more Japanese food, and it was just kind of, I don't know, it was a good feeling to be exposed to that, that culture and, those foods, and that family, just feeling like they were on the same, I don't know, same page, same, they were more, quiet, laid back. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain.
Did you ever ask your mom why she cooked fried chicken?
No, I didn't, but I think when we moved to Doraville, my dad wanted us just to try to blend in, as much as possible. And, we, even though my mother spoke Japanese, we never, I never learned. My sisters, we never learned from her. She didn't speak Japanese at home, only to, her friend and friends back, in California. But I think that, really, they just wanted us to try to blend in as much as possible, and not be, the Japanese family, that ate Japanese food. And I think that, maybe was a lot of it.
How does that make you feel?
I definitely understand why they would want that. And, like I said, I understand it, and I appreciate them, wanting us to try to, just adjust and, try to be part of the the community. Now I think it's just, typical that as you get older, and you're looking back on things, yes, there's a million questions I would love to be able to ask. And I think they would be more apt to share, where, at that time, we moved here. They just wanted to, get settled in and get adjusted and, be good neighbors and all that.
Do you talk to your daughter? How many children?
I just have one daughter.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you talk to your daughter about your experience growing up? You mentioned that your daughter asked about the Japanese internment experience during World War II. And do you talk to her about how it was for you to grow up in Doraville? So she grew up in Tucker. Your daughter was raised in...
She was born in Atlanta at Northside Hospital. And at that time, sometimes we were staying with my parents in Doraville. But then she went to school. We moved out to Snellville. And so she went to school in Snellville and graduated out there. And I've talked to her a little bit, but I haven't, really shared everything. I think she probably knows pretty much, and but yeah, I haven't really had a lot of conversation about it. But I've told her, about some experiences that I had.
Can you tell me about one that really stands out to you?
I can. I'll try not to cry. One, and it's not like this happened a lot. It didn't. But but the things that did happen are just so etched in my memory. I'm pretty sure it was third grade. I was in class, and the boy in front of me, for some reason, he turned around and spit on me and called me poor little Chinese girl. And I don't even remember I remember, feeling terrible, but I don't even remember really talking to my mother about it. I probably told her about it, but I don't remember any conversation about it. But that was probably about the worst. And then I remember in high school, just, how, like kids would line up in the halls, between classes and stuff. And, there's always guys that trying to be funny, and so I remember, walking down the hall and having this one guy in particular, talk like he was talking in an Asian accent and, making jokes and things like that.
How did that first experience when you were in third grade, how did it make you feel?
I don't, honestly, the only thing I can remember is just kind of being shocked. Because, you're in third grade and you're just, everybody's all crazy and being, and so that's the only thing I remember is being so caught off guard, just being, shocked by it and then feeling bad about it. And then that just, replaying that in my mind, throughout my life. So, yeah, that's the only thing I remember really.
If he were sitting here, what would you say to him?
I don't really know what I would say. I guess I would tell him, number one, I'm not Chinese. There is a difference. And that he shouldn't do that. That's not nice. And, you should never treat another person that way.
Were there any repercussions? Like, did you tell the teacher? Like, did
I don't
people
think I don't think I even told the teacher. I don't remember telling anybody, honestly. I know that I know that later, after I was older, I've talked to my sister, told my sister about it, and I've told my husband about it and my daughter. But at the time, I don't remember ever telling anyone about it.
How did that make you feel about yourself?
Bad. Like I was, less than. And like I said, I just kind of carried this feeling of shame and, like I wasn't as good as everyone else. And I just kind of grew to expect that, somebody else might, I might experience that again, or, it was just kind of something that I just lived with.
Has your daughter ever experienced anything like that? I mean, maybe not that degree, but...
The only thing I remember, and, she may have experienced some things and not thought about it or not told me about it, but I remember when she was in high school, there was another girl in her class, and that was part Asian, and something had happened at school, and the teacher, and it was actually this other girl, but I had a conversation with the teacher, and she was sure it was my daughter, and she said, I know it was her because she looked different. And so, I was upset about that, and I wanted to make a bigger deal about it than I did. I wanted to talk to the principal and, and let him know. And but I had a friend that knew the principal and was involved in the school, and he encouraged me not to say anything, so I didn't.
Why?
He didn't want me to start anything. He was his business was very involved in with like the sports and everything at the school. And he was good friends with the coach there and stuff. And he just, I was so upset about it. I was telling him about it. And he just encouraged me not to make a big deal about it, to let it go.
Do you think you did the right thing?
No, I don't. Because I remember saying to him at that time that if it had been maybe African American that this had happened to, that they probably would speak, up about it, and you may not be suggesting that I, let it go. But I felt like, I don't know, that's just what I thought. That's what I told him.
How long ago was that?
That was, let's see, that would have been maybe early 90s, late 80s. That was out in Snellville.
If it was today, what would you do?
I would say I have to say something, and just make it a point that you don't, you shouldn't describe someone as, as different, or, because they have similar features, you should be more sure about what you're talking about and the individual, as opposed to what appearances.
Do you wish that when you were younger someone had stood up for you?
I do, but there wasn't anybody, and because there wasn't very much communication in the family. My mother did stand up for me when she was there, and something happened, but just at other times, there wasn't. I did feel very, very alone, and there wasn't any point in trying to stand up because I was the only one. So.
You mentioned that, you said to your friend if this had happened to an African American that they would have said something and you would have respected their speaking out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a cultural, difference or a different approach or response in different cultural groups to oppression or racism, and why do you think that is?
I do think there is. I think that I can't really speak to the different, I know, being raised by Japanese American parents, that our family, I'm not just speaking about my immediate family, but, their family, my cousins, my uncles and aunts, that they were not as outspoken, or ready to stand up and defend themselves. It was more, I think, more accepting, and where I think, now, and I think, in the past, more the, African Americans there as a group, well, now I guess more so, more outspoken, more organized, ready to speak up, and the Asian community, I don't see a lot of organized. There are definitely organizations, but they're organizations for, Asian, the Asian community, versus I don't know of a lot of standing up and speaking out and defending and all that. I could be wrong, but I don't know.
Do you think that would be a positive thing?
I think that more awareness would definitely be a positive thing. Whether it's the Asian community or any other ethnic groups, that making people aware, I think, would be a very positive thing, as opposed to just, there's this group of people and this is their, what they like and their culture and how they are and how they live. I think being more aware of, we're all people, and we all inside we have our values, and I think we should get to understand people more than instead of just grouping them. That everybody has a right to to be respected and not just kind of set aside as a group of people.
What do you, having witnessed so much change in the area, what do you think the future holds for Buford Highway?
I hope that it continues to attract, people from all over, and will get a reputation for just, really, I know that now that it does have a reputation for, being a melting pot, but I think that there's still a lot of people that have not really experienced or really, come to, eat here or any of the other businesses. And so I hope that, I hope that it continues to grow, and that, to get the good exposure that would attract more people.
Why do you think it hasn't gotten the exposure?
There has been some kind of, I don't know if it's a negativity but I think that there has been, a lot of people are of the opinion, or were, that it was just a bunch of, Asian businesses just for, Asian people. And they don't really, like I said, they haven't really taken the time to come and, and actually experience it for themselves. So I think that, I don't know. I think that they just think it's changed and it's not so much a positive thing. But, hopefully, people like you and, that it will get some better exposure, and people will, I know that people are finding out about it, and, what the area has to offer, and I think it will continue to get better and better.
Do you think whose responsibility is it really to just
get the word out?
Yeah. Who could be doing a better job?
Because I'm not really involved in the community, I don't know what's in place. But I think if there were business owners that were involved and I don't know, maybe more involved in the community. And I don't know. But I think there needs to be some better, I don't know, advertising about the businesses and the restaurants, and so I mean, maybe this is your goal, and that will help. But I do think that there needs to be more. People need to be more aware of what Buford Highway has to offer.
Was there a time over the past, it's almost 60 years now, when you were like, whoa, it's different?
Yeah, probably, I guess maybe about 10 years ago. Yeah, I mean, it was just like all of a sudden, because I've kind of moved away. I mean, I'm still in the area, but not as frequent on, Buford Highway and Doraville and everything. I do remember coming down Buford Highway and being like, wow, there was a lot of new shops, but yeah, I mean, just all the restaurants and businesses and shops and things.
When you were 3 or 4 when you arrived in 1960, what do you think would be different about your experience if you had come today as a 3 or 4-year-old?
I think I would have been happier. Yeah, I mean, I think that I would have felt more comfortable, more welcome. I wouldn't feel like I stuck out, everywhere I went. And yeah, I mean, I think I would have been a happier child.
If you were moving from Chicago to the Metro Atlanta today, I guess at around the same age, if you were the age that your parents were when they moved here, where would you live?
Oh gosh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if I was in their same situation, then yeah, I mean, I probably would have moved to Doraville.
You would have?
Yeah, probably. Well, my dad, when he came down, he was working, his office was right in Chamblee. And so.
What is American Tara? Is
Mm-hmm.
that, how do you spell that?
Tara.
Oh, really? Like
Uh-huh.
like Tara the
Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a carbon paper company. Do you know what carbon paper is? Yeah. Before everybody had all the copy machines and everything, but yeah, the company, that's what they did, was they manufactured carbon paper.
Like ditto paper?
Like, they actually had, I mean, all different kinds, but they used to actually sell it in the store. It would be in a package like this, and it would just be sheets of, it was paper, and the one side was, and you would just use that instead of making a copy. You would write on it, and it would make a copy on the next sheet. And that was what they did. So I mean, I'm sure they're not in business now, but yeah, he worked there until he retired.
What was his expertise?
I'm not sure what he was hired for, but he ended up being vice president in charge of like production. So, I mean, he was the hardest working man I ever met. And so he was, you know, he was a valuable asset to the company. He worked, you know, as hard as he could, and he just, that's what he did. I mean, that's what he felt good about. He worked hard. He was always on call if anything happened. And then, you know, when he wasn't working at work, he loved to garden and work out in the yard, and so he would do that.
They don't, your family doesn't still own the house in Dorville, do they?
They don't. Yeah, when my mom passed away, we sold it. Sometimes I regret that, but at the time, I mean, it was, you know, what we decided to do.
Is American Terra a Southern company, or is it, does it even exist still?
I don't know if it still exists. You know, I think that the home office was in Chicago, and then they did have a location in Los Angeles at one time. But I don't know. It was on New Peachtree.
Where? Where in the Peachtree was it? Is it where the Chinatown is now?
Kind of.
There's so much background noise coming from behind you. It sounds like they're ripping paper. I can hear it really loud. Yeah, because Terra seems like a interesting choice of a company name.
Yeah.
But maybe there's some other significance than
I don't know. I don't know where that came from, but no, I think that it originally was either, it must have, or the home office must have been in Chicago. But yeah, it was on New Peachtree. It wasn't right in that Chinatown area. It was closer to where New Peachtree runs into Shallowford, I think. There's a lot of, yeah.
So Marta wasn't there, right? Until later.
Yeah, I don't know when Marta.
New Peachtree and Shallowford is close to where the Marta station
is. Yeah.
Did you ever visit your dad's office?
I did, yeah. Yeah, my sister and I used to go and visit sometimes.
Do you remember the transition of downtown Dorville between that time when the Marta station was built, or because Buford Highway used to be downtown, right? What was it like? Was that area where City Hall, the pool there? Right?
Yeah, where City Hall is. Yeah. I mean, that street was still the main, the downtown, the main area. Yeah.
And how many lanes do you remember how many lanes Buford Highway was in? It was not the street that it is now.
I'm sure they widened it at some point, but I don't remember when. But, yeah, that area where City Hall is, that was still, where the main, police department and community activities were. There was a big ballpark where they had Little League games, and yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to share? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground.
No, not really. I did bring.
Oh, yeah. Can you talk about these pictures?
Well, this was an article, and it's in two pieces because the top got cut off, and I actually had to ask my sister to scan it and send it to me because I couldn't find my original copy. But it was the newspaper back then. It was a Doraville Citizen, and if I'm remembering correctly, there was a student that wanted to interview, asked if they could interview my parents. And so the article is just about my parents, and a little bit of background about them, and then about the internment and the reparations. And so I just brought that.
Was this the first time you had ever been interviewed about it?
Yes, it was because I actually interviewed my mother and my father. I don't know how much speaking my father did, but yeah, they actually interviewed my mom and dad. Someone came to the house and they interviewed them, and so I just thought that might be something to share. And then the only other thing that I brought, because it said bring photos, and I really couldn't think of anything else. Well, this is the original picture that they took there.
Is that
This was from, yeah.
Reading this article now, when did this article come out?
I'm trying to remember.
We can find that out, but
Yeah, I want to say it was probably in I don't know. It could have been the 70s or the 80s. I can find out. I have a copy of it somewhere, but I couldn't. I was trying to prepare to come here and I couldn't find it. So,
how does reading this make you feel now?
I mean, I recently, there was a special on PBS that I saw recently that my cousin was in, and it was about the internment and how it affected his family. And so, I mean, just in now learning more about it, thinking about my mom and dad and what they went through, it's hard to, realize that they were treated that way. But they were very strong. Like I said, never heard any, wasn't like they carried a lot of resentment. If there was any, it wasn't something that, I don't think they really did. I think they just accepted this was something they went through, and moved on, But yeah, I mean, it definitely now it makes me feel bad for them.
Do you remember how you felt when this first came out?
When this came out? I don't really. I mean, I think I was kind of surprised that, that my mother, that number one, that the young lady thought to, ask them to be interviewed, and then that my mother agreed to it, because they just, didn't share a whole lot about, personal and the past. So, I mean, I guess, that was my only thoughts was I was surprised. But, I mean, I'm, proud and, happy that they did share that. I had printed out the sample questions, so I was just trying to be prepared.
Did you? I saw you took some notes. Were you?
Yeah, I had made some notes in case you asked me these things. So yeah.
Can we talk about them then? Or is there one that you
Well, I think that we already talked about. I mean, I think we've talked about really the main things about that, and then that about the personal life and experiences. I really didn't have any like personal experience that I thought, had anything to do with Buford Highway and how it is now. But just, the asking about, people that influenced me or had any bearing on who I am today, and I would say, my mom and dad, and my sister Lindy. My dad, like I said, he was the hardest working man I ever met, and so he just by example instilled a very strong work ethic, and really, I mean, when I think about my family, my sisters, my brother, our kids, we just all have that same work ethic, and both he and my mom were just so family focused on just my dad. I remember him telling me before he passed away, he said, when you get older, family is what is going to matter, and that's the way my family is. We just, we always had like.
Call me back though, just to make sure that's cut off. Okay, thank you.
We still get together on holidays and as often as we can with my sister and her family and grandchildren, but very strong family values. He and my mom, that's what was important. And my sister, Lindy, who is closest to me in age, she just is a very strong, hard worker, but she has always been very supportive for me, just all throughout my life. So if there's a role model, it would be her.
He's talking. It's like amplified. I feel like I'm spying on him.
Most of them are in your role. I love to pick your brain.
So did she ever step in to be your champion? Those times? Did she know? Do you think she knew you felt alone?
Well,
at times?
jobs are hard to get. I can see how that would.
I don't know.
I'm waiting to hear what you.
They knew that, they knew that I was crying all the time. I mean, it was
You
like,
were.
when I say all the time,
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating.
Yeah.
But it would take nothing to. I was just so sensitive.
What years was this?
Shy. From probably, when we moved to Doraville. Once probably in elementary school, I was so sensitive, I was so shy. It just took nothing to make me cry. So they knew that, and I mean, it was kind of a joke that, I mean, I would anytime I had to go like a school function or church, and I had to go, walk with other kids, I would just be like, head down, just, just super shy.
Do you think you avoided things specifically because you were shy? Did you ever avoid situations?
I probably did, but mostly I always wanted to stay in the background, and I still to this day I like to sit in the back of anywhere. But yeah, I mean that was the main thing. Is I didn't want to ever be the center of attention or exposed. I always wanted to kind of just try to blend in and kind of be in the background.
Well, thank you for being so open and being a part of this and sharing your story.
No, I'm glad I could come, and I hope I hope it was helpful.
I'm gonna have to stop this guy. It's so loud. Oh my gosh. Did you have another picture or something?
Oh, the other thing I had, because I saw this picture of this Dogwood Motel,
What is
which it used to be.
What is this called?
The Dogwood. It was Dogwood Motel, and it had a little restaurant right there. And it used to be where, I think it's where McClave runs into Buford Highway.
Oh,
Right by.
Can I see this?
Yeah, across.
Can I take this?
Sure, across the corner from where Northwoods Shopping Center is.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what is there now.
This is Buford Highway?
Mm-hmm.
It was.
It's on Buford Highway. And that restaurant, my family, we would go and eat there sometimes. And that was one of the places where I remember where, we'd walk in and people would be like staring at us. But yeah, it used to be there. It was there for a while. I don't know when they tore it down.
Do you know how many occasions people would stare? Can you estimate?
Gosh, I have no idea.
Was it frequent, this sense of being stared at?
It was frequent, yes.
How did you respond? Did you just look straight ahead? Or
Well, I mean, I was so shy anyway. I probably had my head down. But yeah, I mean, it happened quite often.
Do you still carry that with you? Do you still feel like, oh, they're looking at me? Or
I don't now, but I did for most of my life probably, and still had that feeling that like somebody might say something, if I was, out in public and just, I just still had that kind of, I don't know if it's a fear, but, that, somebody's going to say something.
what would they say? What is the most...
Something about, I don't know. I mean, even innocently, people, it hasn't happened very recently, but I mean, within the last 5 years probably, people will strike up a conversation about Chinese food or green tea. And that's innocence and ignorance, not knowing. But yeah, I mean, just for a very long time, I was just always concerned about somebody just saying something or making a joke or...
I think I want to ask you these questions that we just talked about over again to cut out his... yeah. Well, thank you.
Do you think it's helpful?
Totally, absolutely. I think it's amazing. I think you know, for a lot of the immigration wave to Buford Highway didn't really start until after, you know, the 60s. It was really later than that, maybe in the early 80s.
Yeah,
you know?
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, because of the change in immigration law. So I think your experience is so valuable to understand, being the first, one of the first. Yeah, I think it just kind of shows how far we've come, and also just, even though there are more immigrants here, I think the individual experience is still an individual experience, which can be very lonely, even though, you know, like, you are among more people that look quote unquote different, but feeling different is still a individual journey. You know, and it's not a we feel different together. You know, I mean, yes, there is that, but there's also still the individual journey.
Yeah.
And to experience that without, because now that there are more people and more groups, it's sometimes easier to find that connection. So not having someone to turn to or talk to, and not having someone to speak up and on your behalf to fight for you is so, it's a very deep experience to have. So I wanted to thank you for sharing that with me and with whoever is listening in the future. Yeah.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, this is amazing. So thank you.
You're welcome.